Welcome to another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. Along with me again is my co-host, Ken. How you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing?
Hang in there, man. Hang in there. For those who are new to the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the Pound for Pound Boxing Report is a blog slash YouTube show slash podcast that discusses all things boxing. Our motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. The bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. There are two main places where you can find information about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. You can go to the official blog page for the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. The link for that is p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. Let me repeat that, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. You can also go to the podcast page. The link for that is p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com. Repeat that, p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com, which features not only past episodes of the Pound for Boxing Report and blogs truly, as well as the podcast page, which features all previous episodes of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report podcast. You can find information on where to follow us on, where to find us all over the internet, all over the interwebs, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Google+, on YouTube, on WordPress, on Podomatic, of course, the Pinterest page, and added this week, the Pound for Pound Boxing Report is also on Stitcher Radio. Be a friend, be a pal, be a buddy. Just check us out on Stitcher. Just look up POUND, the number 4, POUND Boxing Report, or just do a search for boxing. You can find us on there. We just added on there this week. So again, you can find all past episodes of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, not only on the blog page, not only on the podcast page, but also on Stitcher Radio. And on the blog page and the podcast page, you will find links to where you can donate your account. Be a friend, be a pal, be a buddy. Donate your Twitter account. The link for that is donateyouraccount.com/P4pboxingreport. And repeat that, donateyouraccount.com/P4pboxingreport. And what happens is, any tweet that comes from the Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page, your Twitter account would automatically retweet any tweet that comes from the Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page. But all those matters out the way. Let's get this started. Kind of a light week boxing, Kent. Let's talk about kind of the main fight of this past weekend. That was the return of Guillermo Rigondeaux, as he fought in Macau, China, part of a televised, part of a big card in Macau, China. While Rigondeaux scored a first-round TKO over Sod Kokietgym of Thailand. It ended in kind of a controversial way, let's just say, as early headbutt in round 1. It was the first round knockout for Rigondeaux. A headbutt early in round 1. Kokietgym was obviously affected. He went to a neutral corner. Referee gave him time to kind of recover. Once he got up, he was still a bit buzzed, a bit hurt by the punch, a bit affected by the headbutt, excuse me. Rigondeaux reached out to kind of touch gloves. It seemed that he barely touched gloves. He shot back with a quick 1-2, right hand, left hand, that put Kokietgym down and out. To me, even though it was apparent that Rigondeaux was going to win this fight, the way the fight ended left kind of a sour taste in your mouth, because let's be honest here, in watching the fight, it was a bit of a cheap shot, kind of a poor man version of what happened with Floyd Mayweather when he fought. Who was the cheap shot he landed?
Victor Ortiz.
Victor Ortiz a couple of years ago.
But that was much worse than this.
That's why I say kind of a poor man's version of it. It wasn't as bad, but it's yet and still a bit of a cheap shot. And it left a lot. Like I said before, left a lot of sour taste in folks' mouths. And coming off of going into the fact that this was the last fight for Rigondeaux under Bob Arum, it leaves a lot of questions in the air as far as his future.
Yeah, I listen. At the end of the day, Rigondeaux, he is who he is. He's a great fighter, a lot of skill, but, and I pointed out recently, that's not enough to sell him to the mainstream boxing public, unfortunately. And to be honest, he has really done nothing to really get people to pay attention to him. Skills alone ain't and the way he fights, his style of fighting, his skill alone is not going to sell him. I'm sorry. I mean, I respect Rigondeaux as a fighter. You know, I question, what kind of person he is now after what we saw this on Saturday. But at the same time, it still didn't sell anything, because you know what? Listen, Sod Kokietgym. Yeah. All his fans, Rio's fans is bringing up like, oh, he won 35 fights in a row. He was number 3 in the world. Yada 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 yada. Okay, let's just make it perfectly clear. Sod Kokietgym, he won 35 in a row against suspect competition in Thailand, and his last major fight against, on a big stage was 2006, and he was knocked out in 1 round by Daniel Ponce de Leon. So how good really was this opponent? Not really that good. Once you really look at Kokietgym, and no disrespect to Kokietgym, he's a good fighter, but he's not a world-class fighter. Nowhere near that level. And okay, yeah, Rigondeaux did what he had to do. He knocked him out. But the fact of the matter is, he took advantage of a headbutt. And it was an accidental headbutt. Okay, that right there was an accidental headbutt. And then, Kokietgym was given time to recover. But then when Kokietgym went to touch gloves with Rigondeaux cheap shotted him. And he couldn't, and Kokietgym never recovered, and he was counting. The count went to 10. The ref stopped the fight, which I think was a good. The stoppage wasn't controversial because he was damaged from both the headbutt and the punch, but it was the way it happened, the way it transpired, the actions that were taken to get the stoppage. That was the issue, and I truly think that I got the impression that Rigondeaux was like, you don't think I'm like, he basically did was, so Bob doesn't think I'm exciting. Well, I'm going to give him something to think about.
See, that's the sense I get. I'm not going to question his personality, question what kind of person he is necessarily. I think, look, he's heard all the criticism. He's kind of clapped back at some of the criticism in interviews and whatnot. I think he just came in the ring, hell bent to send out a message. I thought he fought a little angry, and that's what you got. And the way that fight ended, the way he hit him with that shot, I just think that that was the result of what went that was the result of him being kind of ticked off, pissed off, in response to all the criticism that he's received in the past few months.
I think that was part of it, but I think the way he went about it was just, it was clear he had a chip on his shoulder, and I get that part, but he kind of has nobody to blame but himself. He wouldn't be in this position if he had just, done a little bit more to market himself. And that's what Top Rank wanted to do with him. They wanted to market him. They gave him a main event slot against Joseph Ejbeka. They gave him an opportunity to prove himself headlining, and the fight was so boring and so, so painful to watch that people literally walked out. How can you sell somebody how could you sell somebody to the boxing public who makes people walk out of the arena? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way, and people like, oh, well, he didn't get a spot. He never got the opportunity Crawford did. Fighting in his hometown of Miami. But the difference with Crawford is, Crawford went out there and took risks and took chances. Crawford took a risk against Bradis Prescott and won the fight. Terence Crawford took a risk, went over to Scotland and fought Ricky Burns and essentially handed that guy his ass. Okay? When you take risks like that, you get rewarded. The thing with Rigondeaux is he doesn't take enough risk to earn that type of reward. That's the thing with Guillermo Rigondeaux. He fights in a style and in a way that nobody's going to pay to watch it. And all these Rigondeaux fans say he should be respected. Would you pay to watch him fight? How many?
Personally, I would. Because you know me,
you're a different guy. Because you're a different guy. But the point is, all these guys talking about how he's disrespected. Would you pay to watch? Would you go thousands of miles? Did any of them pay for a ticket in Macau to watch him? I bet you none of them did. But they'll be complaining on blogs and message boards about how Rigondeaux is disrespected. No, he's not disrespected. People don't pay to watch ho-hum performances. They pay to watch excitement. They pay to see knockouts. They pay to see blood and guts. And that's just the way boxing's been since the beginning. Okay? There's no secret why Pacquiao is so popular. He hits people and he gets hit back. Okay? Guys like Brandon Rios, these are just examples of guys on the top-ranked banner. Look at Brandon Rios. Hits guys, gets hit back. Mike Gallego gets hit back. Juan Manuel Marquez. He gets hit more now because he's older. People want to see that. They don't want to see a master. Like, I respect the skill and the class that Rigondeaux shows, but he doesn't do anything to really generate the buzz like those guys did. And that's just the facts. And
go ahead.
And that's just the facts of the matter. It's not about it's not about hating him or hating on him and disrespecting him. He just doesn't create enough buzz for people to want to go and watch him. You know what I'm saying? Or even care about him. He's Rigondeaux, with all his skill and all his ability, he's a bland guy. It's just the way. It's just because he just won't try to do things to market himself.
My issue, I concede your point about him not being the most exciting guy personality-wise, or maybe even style. I push back a little bit because, for me, I think there's still ways to market him in spite of the way he acts. Because when you look at Whitaker, he fought very much the same way. Didn't have the greatest personality in the world, and yet he was still marketed early in his career and throughout a lot of his career.
Because they put him in with the right opposition.
See, that's my point. I don't even put that Becco part of it in there, because Becco didn't want to fight. How are you going to take chances against a guy who didn't want to fight to begin with after 3 rounds? For me, you can find the right guys to put in there with Rigondeaux to make him look good. The reason Terence Crawford looked so sensational his fight with Yorkis Gamboa is because Gamboa came to fight.
Right.
Scott came to fight. For me, when you look at Rigondeaux, it's going to be tough because a lot of guys in the 122-pound division don't want to fight him. Leo Santa Cruz, they're talking about him possibly fighting Rigondeaux. He doesn't want to fight him. He may have to move up to 126 Rigo and seek some competition there. You could put him in against the right guy, put him in the right situation. And you mentioned about him maybe putting him in Miami. My issue is at least try. Make the attempt and see what happens. Maybe you put Rigondeaux, base him in Miami, maybe put him in a couple of fights in New York, maybe fight him against the home crowd. They may bully him. They may motivate him to say, look, I'm fighting in front of my people. I have to do something. I have to produce. I have to make it exciting, because if I don't, I'll get getting booed in front of my home people. That's not going to happen. Let's move forward. I mentioned this is the last fight for Rigondeaux with Top Rank. It's going to be tough for Rigondeaux to find to be marketed now that he's leaving with Top Rank. Is there anybody out there, Heyman, Golden Boy, maybe a Hearn over in England, the dude Kathy Duva with Main Events? Is there anybody, number one, who's have you heard thinking about interested in signing Rigondeaux? And of those group of promoters, do you think what do you see of any of those promoters I mentioned? What do you think that they could do to market Rigo better?
I think personally, to me, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think Rigondeaux would benefit with somebody like Iron Mike Promotions because they have a lot of Cubans and a lot of Dominicans.
I didn't think about that. Good choice. Good choice.
And I think, and you know, Al Heyman is starting to become chummy with them. You see, he has Francis Barthélemy now. He's becoming a little bit chummy with those guys. So I think that would be a good fit for him. I think they have to build him. I think, to be honest with you, we all got to be honest. Rigondeaux not being marketed, you know, or not being exciting, that's also his fault too. It goes both ways.
Yeah, that's why I say mark him. Boxing a niche sport. Market him as a special niche type product.
Right. I think you need to market him in a. It's hard to market a guy like that. First of all, because he's very stubborn. He's very hard-headed, and he kind of bounces to the own beat of it. You know, he marches to the beat of his own drum, and you get that with his interviews. You can tell that that's how he operates. And I think somebody needs to make Guillermo Rigondeaux understand you got to do more. You can't just sit there and just do what you do at your pace, at your beck and call, because that's not going to help you. You got to do things more. You got to do more things to make yourself exciting. I think a lot of the guy, you know, I think I don't really blame him for Edgebecco, but I felt he could have. You know, I don't blame Rigondeaux for Edgebecco just not fighting in that fight, but I do blame him for not stepping up on the gas and getting the guy out of there when he clearly didn't want to fight. That's my issue with him. He never goes into second and third gear when he has to. He always fights in the same gear. He never shows any urgency. He never shows the desire to want to make himself more appealing because he's afraid of I don't know what it is. It seems like he doesn't want to sacrifice, you know, all of his skill for some excitement, and I think that at this point he has to, because no one's going to pay to watch him just go through one motion, outbox a guy, put on a masterclass performance. People will be bored. They need something. He needs to make himself appealing. You see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to diss the man, okay? The man's got phenomenal skill. He may be one of the greatest amateur fighters ever, okay? One of the most decorated. I mean, he accomplished a lot when he was an amateur, and he's accomplished quite a bit as a pro. It just, he doesn't have the market. He's got to create marketability because it's not there right now. And that's his biggest issue, and it's going to be an issue unless he changes his way of thinking.
Yeah, let's move on. I think, and to sum it up, I think Rigondeaux's career is at the crossroads right now, in flux right now. Going forward, I agree with you that there are things that Rigondeaux can do, should do, need to do. But I also think that part of it, he needs to find the right guy. I think the right guy, whoever handles him next, I think they need to market him in a special way, put him in the right situation, so that one, bring the best out of him in the ring, and outside the ring, market him, promote him in a way to give him more notoriety and give him more publicity. Let's move on to.
I want to jump in real quick and just say, listen, it goes both ways with a fighter. It's the promoter and the fighter.
That's my main issue. It's not just one, either or. In boxing, a lot of times it's both and in Rigondeaux, sometimes guys who are that brilliant but maybe kind of lacking that kind of acerbic personality-wise, you have to do stuff for him. You have to do stuff for him in spite of him. Put it in spite of him, in spite of his personality.
Right, and also it is also up to the fighter to take suggestions and use those suggestions to make himself more presentable.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's both fighter and promoter. Let's move on to kind of the main event of this Macau card. Zou Shiming fighting in his, I believe, his fifth fight, scoring a 10-round decision over tough Luis De La Rosa of Colombia. I look at this performance, Ken. To me, it was the best performance of Shiming's young career, even though he's 33 years old. This is, like I said, this was his fifth fight. He was much more controlled, much more measured. My issue with Shiming, not only the issue with the lack of power and whatnot, but to me, he was too bouncy around the ring. He was not as bouncy. He was much more settled in his attack. He still got hit a little bit too much for my thinking, But again, all in all, good performance by Zou Shiming. It seems like they're talking about a title shot towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I thought he performed very well. He got hit a lot, but I think that's only going to help market him. If you look at it, it's going to help market him because you could tell, like as the fight going. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, Mr. Luis De La Rosa, that was a dangerous opponent in there. That guy was a dangerous opponent. You can say whatever you want about the guy, but that guy came to fight. He was looking to land one bomb. He was looking to land bombs on, and he knew he wasn't going to win a decision against Zou Shiming because Zou is just a superior boxer and faster. So he tried to land the big shots on him. So it was a very entertaining fight. I thought, Zou Shiming clearly won, but it was an entertaining fight, and we seen, Zou face adversity for the first time in his career. He's getting hit quite a bit, but he didn't deter away from his game plan. He came on the inside. That was surprised me a lot that he was fighting on the inside quite a bit because he hasn't been known to do that. But so you can tell that Freddie Roach's philosophy is starting to rub off on him. And I'll tell you, he fought well, and I think that is going to market him. I think it's going to make more guys want to fight him because he put himself in harm's way. And I tell you that it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch. I don't know if he'll beat a top guy in the division, but the man is fun to watch. You got to admit the man is fun to watch. He's entertaining. He's not afraid to mix it up, And Luis De La Rosa was a former title challenger. It is what it is, okay, with De La Rosa. But the man was a dangerous opponent. For your fifth fight, I was surprised how Shiming performed in that fight. That was the best he's ever looked. And that's simply because it was a firefight. From round 1 to round 10. It was a firefight. And that's exactly what Zou needed, an entertaining performance. And I think he's starting to get a little bit of a following. Like outside of China, I think some people are starting to get interested in him, and I think as long as he continue fighting, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a title shot in his next 2 fights.
Speaking of the future from Shiming, early word is that he may fight IBF champion Ahmad Rungroy. Let me say beforehand, quiet as kept. When you look at the flyweight division, it's very good. Very, very good. I would argue that it's one at the top. When you talk about the top 4 or 5 fighters in the division, it's one of the best in boxing, maybe the most underrated division in the sport. You got Akira Yagashi. He's going to be fighting a big fight against former junior flyweight and strawweight champion, one of my top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, Roman Gonzalez, Chocolito. They're going to be fighting in September. You got Juan Estrada, who's kind of like the champion, the man who beat the man who beat the man.
And
he has 2 belts with him.
And he has a fight coming up. He has a fight with Segura coming up. So.
Yeah, Giovanni Segura coming up later on this year. So they're mentioning Rungroy, who has a mandatory title defense
again
coming up in September against
Williams Arroyo.
Yeah, that fight is going to be happening in Thailand. Assess Shiming. Where do you see him? First of all, quickly, where do you see him against? How do you see a potential fight with Rungroy, and where do you see him amongst the top fighters at flyweight? Even though he looked good against De La Rosa Saturday, I think he's clearly a level below the fighters I mentioned: Yagashi, Estrada, Chocolito Gonzalez.
Oh, I agree. And I'll tell you something. If he was a little bit younger, if he was about 10 years younger, you could build him into a great fighter. If he was just 10 years younger, you could build him into a great fighter. But unfortunately, he's 33 years old. He has a very short shelf life. So you're going to have to put him in these fights based on, his experience and his age. And I personally think Shiming would lose to all of them. But guess what? He would put on a hell of a performance. He's got heart, man. He's got heart, and he wouldn't give up in a fight. He would make those fights very entertaining. I don't think he wins those fights, but I think they'd be very entertaining fights. And I think, and I'll tell you this, I think Bob Arum getting into China, it wasn't about Shiming. It was about breaking into the market, and I think Shiming was the way to break into the market.
Yeah.
And I think Shiming, for what it's worth, he's going to have exciting fights. He's going to have exciting fights. I think Rung Roy beats him. I think he beats him because I think Rung Roy he's a bigger guy. He's stronger. And I think he hits a lot harder than...
And because of his style, Rung Roy is very good on his feet. Fast hands, fast feet. He would make Shiming come forward. He would make Shiming... Shiming, even though he jumps around a lot and he seems to have a balance, I think coming forward he would have balance issues fighting a guy like Rung Roy. He would be susceptible to coming and getting caught with counter punches all day long. I don't know how he would handle the jab on Rung Roy, which is very good.
Yeah, see, the thing with Rung Roy, he has a stiff jab, and he goes to the body and he goes to the head, and he's a very strong guy and a very strong fighter.
I see him doing the same thing to Shiming that he did against Ioka. He made Kazuto Ioka fight outside his comfort zone, fight a different fight. He would do the same thing against Shiming. And as far as Yagashi's a tough dude, and Gonzalez, even though he doesn't have a belt, is moving up in weight. Leave him alone, please.
Yeah, I think at this point, all those guys would beat him. I'll say it right now. Gonzalez, Yagashi, Segura, Estrada, Rung Roy. I forgot to mention Estrada. He would outbox or outfight
would
beat him, and that's no diss on Zou Shiming. Zou Shiming's going to be exciting.
It's just that the fact that, like I said
before, the fact of the matter is,
the flyweight division
the division is strong right now, and Shiming is 33 years old, and he has a very short shelf life as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to we've mentioned this guy, Gilberto Ramirez, super middleweight. We've mentioned him. You first mentioned him back in 2012 during our Spreecast days. He's continuing to climb the ladder. He fought on this Macau card, destroying a guy by the name of Talipeau. This is coming off of his destruction of former title challenger Jared Lorenzo early on this year, in April, I believe it was. Much less about the fight with Talipeau because he blew him out. For me, the question is his potential, and when you look at Ramirez, it's time for him to step up in competition. There's no doubt about it. He's just way above the level of fighters he's fighting now. When you're looking forward in his career, what guy at 168 would you have him step up against?
Personally, at this point, I try to move my way into maybe a fight. Personally, if I'm thinking about it right now, there's a lot of guys right there for the taking at 168, especially in the top 15. But I think there's a lot of strong fighters in the division too. They're gonna have to pick and choose their way into if they want to get him a belt. I think Ramirez is the type of guy that we may not see the complete product for a while.
I'll just think of a name right now. I wouldn't mind seeing him putting him in the ring with Edwin Rodriguez.
No, that would be a good fight, actually. And I think that would be a reasonable fight because Top Rank does work with Lou DiBella.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a reasonable fight. I think it would be to step in the right direction. I think he beats Edwin Rodriguez. I think Edwin Rodriguez, for what it's worth, he's a good fighter. But he's not a great fighter. I think we're going to see the best of Ramirez, after he takes a couple losses. Because I still think he's a work in progress. I think he's still developing. And I think 168 is not going to be his weight class pretty soon. I think he's going to eventually move up another weight class because he's a very tall guy. He's a lean guy. He's a long guy. But I'll tell you this. He looked good. He looked good little over a minute he was in the ring. He looked very good. The thing with him is what's a little bit interesting with him, even though he's a tall guy, he gives up his height. He comes forward. He's exciting. It's what people want to see. I think he's a very good fighter. I still think he needs to work on some things, but I think he's a work in progress. He didn't have the amateur background that some of the other guys at 68 have. So I think he's gonna take a couple losses before he becomes a complete product. But I like what I see from him. I've liked what I've seen from him for the last, I don't know, close to 2 years. He's a top prospect. He's only getting better.
Brian Vera would be a good fight for him as well.
Yes, it would be. Yes, it would be. Brian Vera. I mean, there's fights out there that he can, that he needs to step up against, but he's clearly ahead of the C-level fighters. He's clearly ahead of him. He's a mile ahead of them. I mean, his toughest test to date so far was Giovanni Lorenzo, and Giovanni Lorenzo was pushed and bossed around and beaten up in the fight. It wasn't a competitive fight, but that's the guy that's really pushed him a little bit. That's the only guy to date. So I think he needs a real stiff test. But everything looks to be good so far. His mental makeup looks good. He's got good power. He's got good skill. But I think he needs to correct some things. I think he needs to try not to give up his height so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the news portion of tonight's show. Kind of a buzz was created. A lot of buzz was created by an article in Deadspin by Mike Gallego. Let me get his name right. Mike Gallego. A very hard-hitting article on Floyd Mayweather, detailing his past issues with domestic violence against women, particularly against the mother of his three of his children. Talk about how going back to 2000, 2001, how he's had issues with her. Let's face it, how he basically brought up the issue of Mayweather being a misogynist on one hand and a bit of a woman beater on the other hand. Very hard-hitting article. Talk about what Mr. Gallego, the article, and what he had to say in that article. And I want to ask you another question, a follow-up question about how he brought in a certain fighter, as far as I'm concerned, unfairly.
I'm going to just say right now, this guy, Iron Mike Gallego, sounds like a complete shtick if you ask me. I think he was just looking for something to break in to get his name out there. And it's easy to pick on a guy like Floyd Mayweather because we all know Floyd Mayweather is not a very... he's not a great, he's just not a great person as an individual. He's one of those guys that just, has a lot of baggage, does fucked up things, constantly, just this past week he went to Source Magazine and he basically said bluntly said that he screwed T.I.'s baby mama.
He said he tried to clarify, said he didn't, but based on the video, it seemed like he did.
Yeah, it seemed like he said it straight out. He used the F word. He said I effed, Tiny. But I mean, you know what? I'm gonna say this right now. He's just a guy. He's also, shown picture of two dead babies. I mean, two dead twins. I mean,
yeah. For those who don't know who you're talking about, his past relationship with his ex-girlfriend, now Miss Jackson, they broke up, and he went on Twitter, which, as far as I'm concerned, a very classless move on his part. Basically, showed a sonogram of two fetuses of the womb and whatnot, and basically said this is why we broke up, because she didn't want to give birth to our children. Very, like I said, classless and despicable.
Yeah, I'm going to just be honest with you. You take away Floyd as a fighter, he's an amazing fighter. As a human being, he's about as low class as you come, And basically the article pointed out that Floyd Mayweather is a sociopath. He has very little regard for humans. He He's a very cold-hearted person. There's a lot of issues there with him. I don't know what it is, but that's just who he is. Okay, I'm not going to judge the man. You know, I can only judge. Well, actually, I can only judge the man based on what he's presenting. I don't know him. I mean, yeah, people. You know, he has done good things, and I'm not going to lie about that. He does for charity. That's great and wonderful, but that doesn't change the fact that he'll go and do these, you know, beyond fucked up things. Like he wants to do. He goes around saying, "Oh, he puts up the money for Gennaro Hernandez's funeral, Frazier, all that, but then he cancels it out by doing something fucked up." You see what I'm saying? So there's something socially with him that's off kilter, you know. But at the end of the day, I just felt like the article was just a way to get this guy's name out there. He picked on a guy that was easy to pick on.
Look, when it comes to Mayweather, despite the obvious thing about the Pacquiao, about whether he will fight him and whether he will fight him, or to a lot of people think that he doesn't want any of Pacquiao, I defend Mayweather as a fighter because, look, you just don't knock and dismiss that kind of a talent. I said last week on the YouTube show, and I've said in the past that, look, when it comes, there are only two boxing geniuses in the sport right now, Rigondeaux and Mayweather. And I will even defend Mayweather to a certain extent outside the ring because, look, I'm going to go here and people may get mad at me or whatnot. Black fighters who have a tendency to speak their mind, whether it be Hopkins, whether it be Mayweather, going back to the days of Ali, Tyson, even Sugar Ray Leonard to a certain extent, when they speak their minds, they are always subject to backlash. A lot of times racist backlash. And in the land of 24-hour media, in the land of social media, I love YouTube. The show is on YouTube Live, but in the land of YouTube and Twitter, Mayweather is subjected to a lot of racist trolls. I saw it when he fought Maidana, the post-fight show. I saw so many N-words and monkey and coonness and all this other mess. I got disgusted and I left it because I was just so fed up. So I defend him in that regard because the racist trolls and the backlash he gets. However, Gallego, this might have been a hard-hitting piece. I mean, this was a hard-hitting piece, and he might have been trying to make a name for himself. But it doesn't dispute what he said. It doesn't dispute Mayweather's issues with women, whether it's hitting on women, whether it's talking about women in a certain way. You mentioned you say sociopath. I think he's a bit of a narcissist. He's a guy who still acts like he's 20 years old at times. He hasn't fully grown up. So that aspect of Mayweather I cannot defend. And in totality, along with some other things that he has said, that I will not go on. Well, I will go on talking about why should he give money for Africa and all this and that, other stuff like that. I cannot defend him. So while I defended Mayweather on certain aspects, I can't defend him totally because he has a tendency to be a jerk. He has a tendency to be an a-hole, a self-serving a-hole. Now, in this article, he also mentioned, as far as I'm concerned, wrongly mentioned Bernard Hopkins, basically mentioning, let me find it right quick, Kent.
Well, you're doing that. I just wanted to jump in and, say, like, I understand why Floyd, is the way he is. I understand that. I also understand that he gets attacked a lot. And most of the time, sometimes it's fair, most times it's unfair. Okay, let's just put it to you that way. But I think it also comes with the territory. When you reach a certain level of fame that he's obtained, especially now that he's kind of a crossover celebrity, you're open to criticism, you're open to attacks, and that comes with anybody who's in the spotlight. So I do get that part, and also you got to also understand Floyd didn't have the easiest time growing up. Okay, his dad went to prison. You
His
know,
mom was on drugs.
mom was on drugs, and he saw a lot of things that he probably shouldn't have seen at a young age. Okay? So at the end of the day, I definitely think there's something off there, but a lot of it's due to his upbringing, and I just don't think he's a very socially, productive person. I think when he does, I think when he tries to do good things, it can be interpreted as, oh, he just wants attention. But I do believe there's a side of him that is good, that he wants to do the right thing, but there's also that other side that does the wrong things. And I think at the end of the day, he's not perfect, okay? I just feel as a society, we kind of glorify these people who are, either narcissists, sociopathic, especially athletes, other celebrities, actors. We sort of glorify these people, and I don't think, and people are like, well,
Not just narcissist and sociopath, but also a bit of a hypocrite. I mean, you cannot sit there in good faith and get on Diego Corrales when you're about to fight him and talk about his issues with, I think it was his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife at the time. When quiet is kept, you knew you had an issue with women yourself and put your hands on women.
Right. And listen, I think a lot of the stuff that Floyd's done, especially abusing women, is stuff that he probably seen growing up. So he thinks in his mind that's acceptable. That's acceptable way to conduct yourself, which it isn't. And there's definitely, you could see there's there's issues there with him that have never been addressed. And listen, he's not the only fighter with those issues. Okay. We've glorified guys like Edwin Valera, and I'm not going to even go into that. If anybody wants to look up anything on the tragedy, the tragic end of Edwin Valero, you can go look it up on Google. There's plenty of articles on it.
One, it would take up the bulk of the rest of this show, and two, that's even more disturbing than what
and then you've had fighters in the past that have committed their own ills and atrocities. I mean, Floyd is not the only fighter who has done these things. There's plenty of fighters. You can go look them up. I mean, they're documented. All you have to do is look. And the problem is a lot of people don't take the time to read and to look at what you're idolizing. Okay. At the end of the day, you know what? Floyd is not perfect, okay? Maybe as a fighter, he's perfect. He's got a perfect record. He hasn't lost a fight. But as a person, he's not perfect. I don't think anybody is. But I think the article, to be honest with you, it's all verifiable and documented facts. But I think this guy was just trying to find an easy mark. That's what it was. And Floyd is based on his past, is an easy mark.
I can't find it right now, but basically what the article I was mentioning, Bernard Hopkins, he basically, Gallego threw Hopkins in there and talked about how Hopkins is in his word, barely hanging on the edge and barely on the right side. He got pushed back for that, and I want to give a shout out to a supporter, a follower of the Pound for Pound Box Report Google page, Lexi Milton, showing basically sending me a link to where Gallego clarified his position, basically saying, and here's the direct quote, with Gallego's retraction. He said, I was talking about how Hopkins is marketed as opposed to who he is. The executioner's mask, the Puerto Rico incident, all of it. He's marketed as some sinister, scary character. That's why his criminal record from way back when adds credibility to his storyline. First of all, Hopkins is not marketed as some sinister, scary character. That's called boxing. That's called a boxing stick. And when he wants to talk about the execution mask, that wasn't, for the most part, during Hopkins' career on the come up, trying to up his profile. That wasn't trying to make him out to be some scary dude. And when you look at the Trinidad situation in Puerto Rico, and for those who don't know, what happened is during the press tour for his fight with Trinidad, one incident in New York, Hopkins wrongly grabbed the Puerto Rican flag from Trinidad's hand, threw it down when he was in, I want to say, San Juan doing the tour from there. Hopkins caused some other records to the point where the fans reacted, and Hopkins basically had to literally run out the building, hop on a helicopter and fly out of Puerto Rico. Look, was Hopkins asked right in doing that? No, but if anybody knows anything about Bernard Hopkins, he is a master of psychological warfare. There's a method behind his quote-unquote madness, which is not really madness, and it was about that more than anything about Hopkins being some ultra bad guy. That's number two. And secondly, you cannot put Hopkins, throw him in this article and act like there's some equivalent or there's some comparison to the known actions of Floyd Mayweather. It was just wrong on his part, Ken.
Yeah, listen. Bernard Hopkins will openly tell you, if you ask him, he will openly talk about his time in prison and what the crime he committed, and he's not ashamed of that. He was on the wrong side of the tracks, okay? But when he was put in jail and had his freedom taken away from him, that changed his life. You could see that changed his life.
And let's keep in mind that when Hopkins was released from prison in 1988, he had like 10 years of probation. So he had to stay on the right path.
Exactly. And when he got out of prison, I mean, that's when that's where he started boxing, in prison. He had no amateur background. He had no, he wasn't groomed from the beginning. He learned everything on his own, because first of all, his trainer was an absolute genius, Bowie Fischer. God rest his soul.
Yes.
He had a great teacher in Bowie Fischer, and he had people around him like brother Nazim Richardson, people like that that molded him into the fighter that he is today. And he, let me tell you something. He admits in life he's not perfect. In boxing, you better believe he's perfect, because a man who can fight up damn near 50 years old, you have to be perfect in the game.
Right.
You have to be perfect. He took care of his body. He's taken care of his body so well. He eats the right things. He exercises. He does everything that's right and by the book.
He's like a damn monk.
Yeah. What he calls it, he says he calls his body his temple, and he takes care of that. And after fights, after he has a tough 12 rounds, in a fight like Shumenov, he goes back to his room and soaks in a bathtub. He don't have no time for the club and being out there celebrating. He understands what it takes to be a fighter, and he's understood that since day one. And I think he had time. He had probation, but he became someone that young fighters can honestly look up to, because he's living proof that you can do anything you want to be. You can be anything you want to be, and accomplish all of your goals, by doing the right thing. Once he got out of jail, he's been perfect in the sport. He's done some crazy stuff, and build up the fights, the Calzaghe fight, the Trinidad fight. But you got to understand that also that he probably was trying to create controversy, but he went about it the wrong way. That doesn't change the person he is. Okay, there's some videos out there of him talking about about having your body perfect, and about there's no teachers left in boxing, only trainers, and he's done several videos on that, and that was a candid. That's probably the most candid you will ever see Bernard Hopkins. And he was teaching right there. That wasn't him promoting a fight. That was him teaching that they're about the sport. And I'll tell you, listen, I would listen to him any day talk about the sport, because he's been through everything that you could possibly be involved in boxing. He's gone through the heartache, the pain, all the pitfalls of boxing, and he's a survivor. And he should be idolized forever. I think he should be glorified, and what he became, not for his prior past life, but what he became in boxing.
the struggle to get where he is now, the publicity, the notoriety that he's gotten now. Keep in mind the struggles that he had with promoters and managers throughout his career. He didn't have the entitlement and privilege like Floyd Mayweather has had throughout his career, and yet you see how Hopkins has been a model citizen in and out of the ring.
Absolutely, and listen, and Bernard is the type of guy that if he meets a young fighter, he'll sit down and talk with him about doing the right thing in boxing. And I think eventually, once he retires, I think he's going to end up going around the country and giving talks and lectures, because I think he has a lot to give to the young people of America. You know, they need somebody like him to tell them that there's the right way to do things. You know, you don't have to be, you don't have to stay on the wrong track. You can always. He went on the right track once he saw that his freedom was taken away and how precious it was. He changed his life. He's not a perfect person by any means. You know, he's done some stupid things. You know, he's gotten himself in trouble. But when it comes to boxing, he understands that to be in this game, as long as he's been in, you have to be perfect. You have to do all the right things. And that's what he's done. And that's what all young fighters should look up to, is Bernard Hopkins. What he became, with all the struggle and the pain and the hard work, what he became is what fighters should idolize.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to talk about another subject, but since we're pressed for time right now, I will respond to a couple of comments on the YouTube chat, and then move on to talk about the preview of what's going down this weekend. Industrials 31, in our discussion about Rigo and possibly a fight with Santa Cruz, he put out a link to a tweet that Santa Cruz put out on Twitter today, basically saying he's ready to fight Rigondeaux anytime, anywhere. Another guy, D. Akoji, excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, my apologies. He said the Top Rank have disrespected one of his best boxers. I've seen Eric criticize Rigo to his face while Rigo was doing an interview. Don't congratulate guys for being willing to take punches. Your response to the Santa Cruz tweet, as well as the comments about Top Rank.
I think the Santa Cruz fight won't happen right away. I think it's a viable fight. I think it's. I just don't think there's a lot of money in it right now. I think it's a good fight if it does ever come off, but the problem is there's no money in the fight right now.
Yeah, I think because I think right now there's more money for Santa Cruz and about with Quigg.
Frampton.
I'm sorry, Frampton.
And two.
Well, actually, it is Quigg because Frampton, he's going to be fighting Kiko Martinez in September, so it is Quigg.
No, Frampton is fighting. Wait a second. It's definitely Frampton. Frampton's fighting Kiko Martinez, and that's like supposedly if Frampton gets past that fight, they're looking at a fight with Santa Cruz.
Okay.
But also, yeah, I agree. Arum has done no favors to Rigondeaux. But I think, like I said, it goes both ways. You have to work with each other. It just seems like Arum and Rigondeaux were never going to be a good fit because they're two headstrong guys with different visions of how things are supposed to be. And I think Arum, yes, he has gone out of his way to disrespect Rigondeaux. But I also think Rigondeaux has done his share of disrespecting too. And I think at the same time, I think it's a good thing that relationship's coming to an end. But I think Rigondeaux needs a fresh start. That's the important thing. He needs a fresh start with another group of people that are willing to market him. And I just think the Arum situation was just a bad relationship because Arum doesn't market those type of fighters. He markets guys who hit and get hit. That's what he's been marketing lately to a lot of success. And let me tell you something. Rigondeaux was not the first Arum fighter with a style like that he's dissed. If you go back and you do some research, he always used to diss Michael Nunn. All the time. You know, like his fight against Iran Barkley, he called it a 75-cent performance. So he's done that before. So it's no secret that Arum does not like that style. So at the end of the day, I think it was a little bit of both, and I just think it's a good idea that that relationship is coming to an end, and it is over, and Rigondeaux can go on to other things, to a different promoter that's probably going to be more friendly to him.
Let's move on and talk about what's going down this weekend, what's going to be happening this weekend. Doubleheader on HBO at MSG. Gennady Golovkin returning to the ring to fight, as far as on paper at least, seems to be the toughest fight of his professional career at this point, fighting former IBF champion Daniel Gill on the undercard of that bout. Pretty interesting heavyweight bout between Brian Jennings and Mike Perez. I want to talk about the Perez and Jennings fight first. Heavyweight bout, title eliminator. Let's talk about. We've talked about Jennings in the past. I think over his last couple of fights, last 3-4 fights actually. I'm not going to say he has regressed, but I think he's kind of plateaued a bit, kind of stagnated. There's no real improvement as far as I'm concerned against the Perez, who I think maybe still feeling the mental effects of his fight with Abdas Lumov, in which Abdas Lumov was his career was ended as a result of the injury suffered in that bout. In his next fight with Perez, he didn't look very good. Your thoughts on this bout, Kent? Do you think on Jennings and Perez? Because I think right now I want to go with Jennings because I don't know that mentally that Perez has suffered from what he went through a couple of fights back.
You know what? I would give the edge to Jennings, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was a very close fight and it ended up being a split decision or a draw, because it just has that feel to it. It's a good fight on paper. I'll be honest with you. I think neither guy beats a top heavyweight. They're good fighters. They're good fighters, but they're not being the top heavyweight.
Yeah, I thought Jennings had the chance to be special when I first saw him, but over his last, like I said, handful of fights,
as he stepped up in competition, you can see he's not the same. He's not as special as you would think he would be. But I will say this about Jennings: he's a family man. He worked very hard in the gym. I'm not going to diss him because I just don't see him being the next great American heavyweight. I think he's going to be a contender. I think he's going to be in the mix, but I always see him falling short in a big fight. But he is a good heavyweight, and for him to accomplish what he has in the last 3 or 4 years is near remarkable considering his lack of amateur background.
Right.
And personally, I think he's a good boxer. You know, he's a very effective when he stays on the outside and doesn't, you know. And I think Michael Perez is going to try to come in, you know, because he's a smaller guy and he's going to try to get to the body and rough him up and attack. I think it would best serve Jennings to keep Perez on the outside and use his jab. It would also benefit, Jennings to use a lot of movement. Don't let Perez crowd him and get to the body. And I think that, and on the other turn, Perez is going to try to get to the body, try to rough him up, try to work on the inside, try to land some good, clean, short punches on the inside. It's a very intriguing fight, actually. I think I would give the edge to Jennings because I think he's the guy that they probably want to push more than they want to push Perez, because Perez, number one, he's Cuban. He was given an opportunity to showcase himself even further after the Abdul Salamov fight, but he didn't look very good against Carlos Takam, who I think personally Carlos Takam, despite the mental issue with Perez, I think Takam is an underrated heavyweight. He doesn't get the credit he deserves because he simply doesn't have the backing. But at the same time, I think Jennings wins a close fight. I think it'll be a competitive fight. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a split decision or even a draw, because it's that type of fight. It's two guys with different, they're contrasting styles, and it'll depend on what the judges like, and it's going to be a competitive fight. I don't see it being a blowout either way.
And in terms of the fight with Golovkin and Gale, Gale presents some. I think Gale presents some challenges for Golovkin. Golovkin is the stronger guy. He hits harder. But I think Gale has kind of a herky-jerky style. He has a decent jab. He has a decent chin. I think early on, I think in the first half of the bout, I think he may give Golovkin some issues because of that style. I think he'll give him some movement that Golovkin hadn't seen before, some angles that Golovkin hadn't seen before. But the question is for me, what does Gale, over the long term, over the long haul, as the fight goes into, let's say, the 8th, 9th, 10th round, I don't know what Gale has physically, power-wise, strength-wise, what he has physically to hold Triple G off of him. I don't think that over the long haul, Gale can stop Triple G from going to the body. And I think over the long haul, not just the power punches to the head, but I think it's the body work is going to be the key for Golovkin in this fight.
Yeah, I think the thing with this whole fight is, let's just be real. Gale is probably the biggest name and the toughest fight that Triple G has had his entire career. And I think Gale's herky-jerky style is going to cause problems, especially early for Golovkin. He's a little bit faster than Golovkin, but the thing that kind of suggests to me that Golovkin's eventually going to get to Gale is Gale has a habit of standing in the pocket too much.
Yes.
He stands in front way too much. And against a guy like Golovkin, you can't do that. He will make you pay to the body and to the head. And Golovkin's very good at cutting off the ring. The thing with Gale, he's a very good fighter, okay? But also he has a tendency of not doing enough to win fights. Like, example, the Darren Barker fight, the first fight with Anthony Mundine, which a lot of people thought, Gale won, myself included. And I just think that I just can't see Gale holding off Golovkin for 12
See, here's
rounds.
the thing. Gale's best fight was against Sturm, and I think he's going to have to fight at an even higher level to get a win against Triple G, and I don't know if he has it in him to fight at that level.
Right, and this is the thing with the Gale and Sturm fight. Remember, Sturm, as he's past his prime, his work rate has gone down. His work rate, the punches weren't there, so it was easy for Gale to be busier and to land the more impressive shots. Golovkin, on the other hand, can match Gale's work rate. That's the one thing about him that most people don't realize. He can match work rate. He's a work rate guy. Even though he's got he's a big puncher, he matches work rate. And I think that's going to be key. Eventually, at some point, I think Gale is going to get into a situation where he's not going to be able to hold off Golovkin any longer. He's going to tar her down a little bit. And I think I think Golovkin's eventually going to get to him with body shots, and I think that's where he stops him to the body. I think it's going to be a competitive fight early, but as the rounds go on, I think Golovkin figures out Gale and he becomes stronger. And that's the one thing about Golovkin. As the fight goes on, he becomes stronger. He doesn't slow down. He becomes stronger. And that's going to be, I think, the key to the fight. I just don't think Gale has what it takes to hold him off for 12 rounds.
So let's move on very quickly. This last fight, Tyson Fury, he was supposed to fight Derek Chisora this Saturday at Manchester. Rematch. Chisora broke his hand. Now Fury is going to be fighting Alexander Ustinov, the guy in which Chisora broke his hand against. They're going to be fighting in Manchester, England. I look at this fight, Kent. Look, Fury, Ustinov, to me, he fights like a poor man's Vitaly Klitschko, up high with his hands. Uses his arm when
he's a
high with hands.
I've always
long kind of jab, a little bit stiff, but he's not as good as Klitschko. He's not as in shape as Klitschko. He's not as talented as Klitschko. A little bit
clumsier version of Vitaly Klitschko.
Right. And I think Fury, he's going to get hit because he get hits in every fight. But I think he's in such good shape because of the preparation for Chisora. I think it's not going to matter. I think he's going to eventually score a win over Ustinov. Ustinov may give him problems early on because of the awkward style, but I think over time, Fury, he will get the win.
Yeah, I think Fury will stop him late or win a clear decision. Ustinov's a big guy, strong guy. He's very clumsy. Has a style similar to Vitaly Klitschko, but he's very clumsy. He's very stationary. He's there to be hit, and I think eventually Fury's going to be able to hit him Fury's going to hit him with the kitchen, everything but the kitchen sink, if he comes in there right mentally, which I don't think that's going to be a problem because of the comments he made. Even when the fight was agreed upon, he called Chisora a shithouse. He's basically seething over the fact that Chisora injured himself and pulled out of the fight. That fight is supposed to happen in September. It's been rescheduled for September. But I just think that Fury's just going to get to the body of Ustinov and just really going to be able to tee off, as the fight goes on. But I'm looking. This is also it's a tougher fight than people think because of Ustinov's size.
Yeah,
he's a big guy. He's not the most skilled guy in the world. He's not has the most finesse, but he's a big guy, and big guys are not. You're not going to go in there and walk in and try to, mow him down in the first round. You have to pick your spots, and I think that's what Fury's going to do. He's going to fight a smart fight. He's going to break him down intelligently, and I think I think he's going to either stop him late or win a clear decision, and then he'll move on to fight Chisora, which actually was a fight I was looking forward to. I actually gave Chisora the edge, to win the fight. But this is not a bad replacement, Ustinov. It's better than having a guy that's faded or a journeyman coming in the fight. This is a decent fight.
Yeah, and I think we're going to end the show on that note. I'm not sure we'll be back next week. We may. I have to check some things out, get some things done on my end. If not, we'll definitely be back in 2 weeks. On the next episode, we will definitely do a recap of this fight. If we're back in a week, we'll talk about the Brandon Rios, Diego Chavez fights with Sergey Kovalev. Coming back into the ring, if we're back in 2 weeks, we will talk about the Showtime card, that ridiculous card as far as I'm concerned, with Danny Garcia and Salka and Lamont Peterson and Edgar Santana. Either way, when we will be back, we will definitely be talking boxing. For those who want to get in contact with you, Kent, let the folks know where they can find you.
You can reach me on Facebook at kent.ayers.1, facebook.com. I'll be willing to talk boxing with anyone who wants to talk about it in a respectful and dignified manner. I don't answer the trolls. I never have and never will. That being said, you can hit me up there. If you see me on the show and you watch the show and you want to hit me up, just let me know, because I usually don't answer to many people that I don't know, and I only basically add people in the boxing community I know or fighters. So if you hit me up, let me know if you see me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to hit me up, you can hit me up on Twitter, Brother JR at MICWILJR, capital SC. If you want to find out more about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, I'll repeat again, go to 2 main places. You can go to the blog page, P4PBoxingReport.wordpress.com. You can go to the podcast page, P4PBoxingReport.podomatic.com. Both of those pages, you can find all information on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, where you can find us all over the internet, all over the interwebs, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Tumblr, Pinterest, the RSS feed, as well as Stitcher now. Be a friend, be a buddy. Hit up Stitcher. I want them views. I want them ratings. Leave some comments there. We just got on Stitcher. We're new to there, so please check us out on Stitcher. Just do a search of boxing, or just do a search of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. That's POUND, the number 4, POUND, Boxing Report. And please hit up Stitcher and hit up everywhere else where you'll find the Pound for Pound Boxing Report all over the internet, all over the interwebs. Again, I want to thank you, Kim, for being on with me again this week. For my co-host Kent, I'm your host Michael. This has been another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. You guys have a good evening.
Good night.